We're going to talk about the healthy writer lifestyle. Being healthy as a writer can be really difficult because we're writing, we're sitting, we're in our heads. It's a very isolated job. Whether it's a hobby or a job, we're very antisocial people as a whole, just because most of what we do is social inside of our heads. And so we're going to start out with mental health and how we can help stay strong mentally as a writer, because that is our tool. And so the first guide to being healthy mentally is to express yourself in writing. It's as easy as that. Sit down with a pen and paper and just write how you're feeling. Don't stop. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about punctuation. Just write. Write down your thoughts, your feelings about a difficult life experience. It can help you deal with the stress of emotional fallout. Dr. James Pennebaker, a professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Texas at Austin, he said, when people are given the opportunity to write about emotional upheavals, they often experience improved health. They go to the doctor less. They have changes in immune function. If they're first-year college students, their grades tend to go up. He said writing helps us focus and organize the experience. Sometimes when we're caught in the middle of an emotional upheaval, it's everything that's going on, and it's hard for us to sit down and categorize what it was that affected us so much in the first place. Whether it's a dispute with somebody, a loss of a person that's close to us, writing it down can really help you categorize those things and help you deal with it. Pennebaker continued to say, people who engage in expressive writing report feeling happier and less negative than before writing. Similarly, reports of depressive symptoms, rumination, and general anxiety tend to drop in the weeks and months after writing about emotional upheavals. So the act of expressing and confessing about traumas can be part of healing for virtually all cultures. This ranges from the cultures of Native Americans, where they talk and chant and make up songs to embrace their loved ones that they've lost, or to capture the things that they've gone through. And it's also based on Western and Eastern religious beliefs that say that talking and writing about the things you've gone through emotionally can help you, but it can also help your posterity deal with the things that you've gone through. Psychology Today reported that researchers have found that people who spend 15 minutes before bed writing down their feelings and writing down what they're grateful for experience longer and better sleep. So if you have trouble sleeping, try to write a gratitude list before bed. And that can get rid of all those negative emotions and all of the stressful things you've experienced in a day and put you in a more positive plane before you go to sleep. Labate, quoting Robert Ornstein's studies, said, one could argue that talking and writing differ in relative cerebral dominance. If language is more related to the right hemisphere, writing may be more related to the left hemisphere. If this is the case, then writing might use or even stimulate parts of the brain that are not stimulated by talking. Often we talk about our problems, but if we write about them, it can help us deal with those things in a completely different way. If you're depressed, write about it as well as talking, because we do need to verbalize to people when we're having issues and struggles. It's important to know that there are people out there who are willing to listen. But writing about it can be another way of helping yourself deal with those issues. Julie Gray, the founder of Stories Without Borders, noted that people who have experienced trauma in their lives, whether or not they consider themselves writers, can benefit from creating narratives out of their stories. It is helpful to write it down, in other words, in safety and in non-judgment. Trauma can be quite isolating. Those who have suffered need to understand how they feel and also try to communicate that with others. Sometimes if people won't listen, it's because they may also be dealing with things, and if you can write it down and express it to them that way, they might have a better way of understanding how you feel and what you're going through, and in turn have an outlet for themselves. So there was a study where college students were divided into two groups. One wrote personally about traumatic events for 15 minutes for 4 consecutive days. The other group wrote about trivial topics. They compared the two groups. The one that wrote about Compared to the one that wrote about the trivial topics, the students who wrote about traumatic experience used fewer pain relievers over the next 6 months. And they visited the campus health center far less often. Just those 4 days of therapeutic writing had a 6-month long-term effect on how many painkillers and things that they needed. In order to improve through this type of writing, Lungford, PhD of the University of Iowa State, said, "You need to focus on thought as well as emotion. An individual needs to find meaning in traumatic memory as well as feel related to the emotions in order to reap positive benefits from the writing exercise." She explains this by saying people who talk about things over and over in the same way aren't getting any better. There has to be growth or change in the way that they view their experiences. So when you're writing emotionally, it needs to be with a purpose. You're looking for a way to help yourself get over it instead of just rehashing and reliving the same emotions over and over again. According to Michael Craig, who's an MD, the former editor-in-chief of Harvard Mental Health, he said, there are 5 things you need to write about. Find meaning in a stressful event, to better manage your emotions, to stop obsessing or brooding over a difficult experience so you can find it easier to talk with other people about it, and find it easier to reach out to other people for support. And so writing can help clarify how you're feeling and better help you put into words so that when you do talk to other people, they can understand. So we're going to move on to the physical health of writers, which is an issue. Most of us deal with that with our sedentary lifestyles. In 2013, New Zealand did a study. They monitored the recovery wounds from medically necessary biopsies of 49 healthy adults. They had half the group write about their thoughts and feelings for 2 weeks before the biopsy. 11 days after the biopsy, they found that 76% of the group that wrote had fully healed, compared to 58% of the control group who were still recovering. So to help yourself emotionally deal with things can show you also how it can affect you physically. Studies have shown that asthma people who write have fewer attacks than those who don't. AIDS patients who write have higher T cell counts. Cancer patients who write have more optimistic perspectives and improved quality of life. And we all know what a positive emotional impact can have on you when you're dealing with severe illness. Writing by hand, as opposed to typing, can help you build the motor memory and actually improve your ability to learn. Which is why at college now, they're trying to encourage students, instead of typing all their notes, to write them by hand, because you're also using the motor skills that are helping you absorb that knowledge better. So the dangers of sitting too long, physical therapist Karen Greenfield said, muscles are not moving, so they get weaker and you have poor circulation. The digestive system is not active. When you walk, your metabolism helps the digestive system. So if you're sitting all day, your stomach, your intestines, your bowels are going to be less efficient. She said when people cross their legs, which is what often a lot of writers do, everyone's uncoughing. This leads to increased pressure on blood vessels. Your veins take the brunt of it. Vein walls can collapse. It leads to spider veins and varicose veins because they need to branch out and find other means of circulation. Your calf muscles, when you're crossing your legs, they don't aid in pumping blood to return the blood to your heart, so that's a risk of blood clots, which is why when you're post-surgical, they get you up and moving and get you walking around. And we were talking earlier at the Hazards to Writers Health panel, and one of our friends had lost a friend who had a very sedentary lifestyle, drank a whole lot of Mountain Dew, and he passed away last year. And I think he was 35 or 36. And it's because our writer lifestyle, it's sit and write. Don't do anything else. Stay there. Any distractions are supposedly bad. What I have found as a writer is to get up every 20 minutes. My husband's a chiropractor, And we were talking about how, as a writer, when you begin, if you write by paper or by a laptop, you start in a good position. You're sitting, you have your back straight, you have your neck up, you have your wrists where they should be. But as you start to write, the more you write, the writer's fatigue sits in and your body just kind of crumbles together. And by the time you're done, you realize that you're in this really hunched over position, and you kind of have to straighten up and stretch. The way we can prevent that is to get up every 20 minutes and set an alarm to do so, because if you don't, you'll get caught in that writer's stream, and you might think, oh, I can wait because I'm caught in this and I don't want to, lose my train of thought. But you need to get up, you need to get moving, and getting moving will help inspire you further, because your brain needs that oxygen and the fresh blood, and your heart will pump. You'll get that nutrition flowing. I always say, get up, walk, and go get a snack. And that way you're keeping your brain active, eat something healthy, and we'll talk about healthy foods. But yeah, get up and walk.
But have you found that the stand-up desks?
We talked about that a lot. The stand-up desks, they're really nice, and they have pads that you can buy now. I think they're about $100 that are made for standing on, so that you don't ruin the arch in your feet. And they're different levels and kind of weird shapes, so that it keeps you in this constant adjusting, which is good for your body because you're not being completely still. But it's also keeping you from locking your knees and things like that. But yeah, we're made to stand up. We're not supposed to be sitting and laying down all day, which is why when we do so, we have a tendency to feel more depressed, and the more we lay down, the less we want to be active. And it's a vicious cycle. Instead of wanting to get up and be active and have that drive to get stuff done, we get more and more sedentary. And especially when we're eating bad things too, it's just a compilation of things that's holding us down. But it's also impacting our ability to be as fluid as we want to be as a writer. With food and writers, water is something that is often very overlooked. We rely on our coffee or our soda and our sugar drinks and things like that to get us going. And while that's okay in a little bit, as Cheree said, in terms of nutrition, drinking water is very vital. It keeps you from being hungry. Typically, writers and people on computers often drink coffee and sugary items, but if you drink more water, it will help. For those who need caffeine, he recommends a cup of green tea, which has a lot of antioxidants and will give you the energy you're looking for. Caffeine has been found to increase creativity because it allows the dopamine levels in your brain to maintain, keeping the signals between neurons firing on all cylinders long after the energy levels would regularly allow. Which is why, as writers, we crave caffeine and we crave things that keep our brain going. But we do need to search for alternate means that aren't full of sugar and things that are gonna weigh us down in the long run and have us crash. So here's step by step on how to just begin an introduction into that less sedentary lifestyle. Start out simple. Cheree recommends doing 20 squat reps per day to get your blood flowing. 20 is not very much. Once your endurance grows, add sit-ups and some other exercises. Take a 20-minute break, and he's recommending a 20-minute break every 2 hours. I find a 3 or 4 minute break every 20 minutes really helps keep me going, but it just depends. For me, I have 7-year-old twin boys, so I spend a lot of time chasing them around the house. So that's a good break. He says walk outside. Fresh air stimulates the brain and blood flow and helps you be a more focused writer when you return to your seat. Stretch. Stretching is very important as a writer, especially because we have a lot of repetitive use injuries. Carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, trigger finger, neck things. When I used to ghostwrite for Young Living and for doTERRA, and then I would go home and I would write my books. And so by the end of the day, I couldn't move my wrists at all. When my husband was in the middle, we moved to Texas, and he was going to chiropractic college out there, and he started working at my wrists, and it had gotten to the point where I was afraid that the next week I would have to go get both of them done, have the surgery done, because I couldn't do anything. And he started treating me, and within a month, I've had no pain, and it's been, 10 years since that happened. And so see a chiropractor. You never know if you have a C1 or C2 impingement in your neck or something going on in your thoracics that's affecting your hands. And if you have pinched nerves in your neck, it's affecting the flow to your brain. And so if you feel yourself being muggy and not having the drive to write and losing that passion, go get it checked out, because there's probably something physically that's going on that might not even be from that mental cloud that you can just deal with easily and cheaply and prevent long-term issues. We never know if our chairs or if our pillows or anything like that are causing us to have a hard night's sleep or a hard time writing and causing more problems for us long-term. So stretching is important. Learn the stretches that'll help the areas that you feel impinging. And there's a lot of recommended stretches for carpal tunnel, for tennis elbow, for your back, for your knees. Take some time to stretch. You can do that during your little break. Sleeping. According to Life Science, a lack of sleep can cause a reduced ability to concentrate, decreased attention to detail, increased risk of motor vehicle accidents, and medical problems including obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. And that makes sense. That's kind of a ODA statement. But what they're recommending is at least 7 to 8 hours a night. It's essential. Most of us I cannot feel like I run properly on 4 to 5 hours. My husband can. I don't know how he does it. But for me, I can feel the difference when I've had a good night's sleep and then I sit down to be creative. It has a huge impact on my productivity. They say at least 7 hours a night is essential. We need to sleep in order to give the body time to rebuild what it broke during the day of activity. And the same applies to your brain. We're using up all those neurotransmitters. We're using up all of our creativity. We need that sleep at night to be able to reset and refocus for the next day. So we'll go into neurotransmitters. And for writers, this is a very important topic. My sister-in-law gave me a mug for Christmas, and it says, "The voices in my head tell me what to write." And we laugh, but we also know how true that really is. We have the characters in our heads. We converse with them. We know when their birthdays are. We know what their favorite colors are. They tell us what should happen in our stories, and how we have arguments with them when they don't want to do the things that we put them down to do. And for most people, that sounds crazy, but for writers, there's the case where your character just takes over, and it's wonderful because when the story starts writing itself, it's a wonderful thing. But it also walks a fine line, and it's this line that's starting to get a whole lot of attention as far as mental health. There's a link between creativity and mental illness, and that might sound cliche, but it's true. I mean, how often, if you think about it, how often are writers portrayed as crazy? There are many accounts of creative people who suffer from mental illness, and that's not a coincidence. Researchers at the Swedish Medical University have shown that the dopamine system in a healthy, creative person is similar in some respects to that seen in people with schizophrenia. High creativity, high levels of dopamine, but there's also a link to schizophrenia there, which is why creativity is also linked to a higher risk of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Dr. Ulen from the Swedish University said, "The study shows that highly creative people who did well on the divergent test had lower density of D2 receptors in the thalamus than less creative people. Schizophrenia, people that are suffering schizophrenia also have low D2 density in this part of the brain. And why is this? Because fewer D2 receptors mean a lower degree of signal filtering. There's a higher flow of inflammation from the thalamus, and it's not being inhibited or categorized. But that's why highly creative people are also seeing numerous uncommon connections in problem-solving situations. Creative people are great at solving problems because we can see outside the box, because we see many possible answers instead of just one. And that's because of the fewer D2 receptors. It says more and more research is being done on how neurotransmitter deficiencies affect everything, from our behavior, our ability to concentrate, our memory, our organ function. With all neurotransmitters, there's an optimum balance. We don't want too much, we don't want too little. In 2005, they studied 30 writers from the Iowa Writers Workshop and compared them with 30 people of similar IQ. I always wonder how this study went. And they also had comparable educational advancement. They found that the writers had a higher rate of mood disorders than the control group. Now, as writers, we know we're very passionate people, and we have a little bit more of a tendency to fly off the handle over smaller things because we think through things so much. That can be great for writing, but that can also be hard socially when you overthink every situation, and we have to learn to pull that back. This was the statistic that kind of caught me by surprise. 1.2 million Swedish patients went into a study by the Journal of Psychiatric Research. They said that writers were 121% more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder than the general population. 121%. They said authors were also found to have a 38% increase in anxiety disorder. Rates of alcoholism, drug addiction, and suicide also increased among writers. They said they studied 1,600 writers. Psychologist James Kaufman found that poets, particularly female poets, were more likely to have signs of mental illness. And so they're trying to figure out where this link is coming from, and they're finding it through neurotransmitters. The brain sends electric currents through the entire body through brain chemicals called neurotransmitters, which then send the energy and information to your cells, your glands, and your organs. Neurotransmitters are amino acid-based molecules that, if they're imbalanced, they can affect our ability to think creatively. And it can also be one of the major causes of writer's block, and why we can get so frustrated when we've had such a good flow and a good story going, and then nothing happens. It's because we can burn out those neurotransmitters. There's the primary neurotransmitters are acetylcholine. Acetylcholine keeps your cells moist. It's the building block from the myelin, which protects nerves throughout your body. There's GABA, which is like the brain's Valium. It provides calmness, and it aids in the production of endorphins. We have serotonin, which deals with your ability to sleep deeply and to think rationally, and it also imbues your excitement for life. And then there's dopamine, which works as a natural amphetamine. It controls your energy, excitement, and motivation. For writers, it's the dopamine exhaustion that we deal with a lot. Dopamine controls the flow of information in the frontal lobes up to the other areas of the brain. Dysfunction of the frontal lobes causes a decline in cognitive function, including memory, attention, problem solving, and creativity issues. The dopamine receptor D2, which we talked about earlier, and specifically its thalamic function, is important for the creative performance. The D2 receptors have been linked to both positive and negative psychotic symptoms. So if you're having a decrease of dopamine, there are several symptoms: depression, mood swings, poor attention, food cravings, like for caffeine and other stimulants that are going to pick that back up, restless leg syndrome, weight gain, chronic boredom, just can't find anything that stimulates you or excites you, loss of satisfaction, apathy, just don't care, chronic fatigue, low physical energy. If you find that your body's cold and your hands are chilled a lot, poor circulation, that can also be related to a lack of dopamine. Research has shown that brain neurotransmitter deficiencies contribute to hundreds of health problems that affect us physically, mentally, and emotionally. The normal brain processes a thought in about 320 milliseconds. If our thinking is slowed down to 400 milliseconds to process a thought, we can no longer process logical thoughts. Slower brain speed leads to neuropsychiatric problems, memory loss, depression, and physical problems. Depression can suppress your immune system. Anxiety disrupts digestion, and anger can have an adverse effect on our liver. So what do we need to do to increase our neurotransmitters? What we're doing to decrease them right now is unhealthy eating, high levels of metal in our vitamins, which is an interesting thing. They're telling you, take vitamins, they're really good for you. But if you look at the vitamins you're taking, check out the amount of aluminum and zinc and iron and things that are in it, because you might be surprised. We switched ours a while back, and I can tell mentally a difference just being on different vitamins. And those high levels of metal have actually been been thought to lead to increased chances of getting Alzheimer's. And so those are things that you want to watch. We're decreasing our neurotransmitters by chronic stress, not dealing with emotional issues and letting them build up inside. We need to let those out, whether it is by writing or talking to somebody. Lack of activity, which we talked about, sitting too much, can decrease your neurotransmitters because you're not getting your body flowing, you're not getting your circulatory system working, not getting enough sleep. And then genetics. Sometimes we're just born with that higher inclinity. My dad is bipolar, and that's something that I've had to learn to live with. My sister deals with bipolar, and so it can be genetic, and it can be something that, it might be a battle you're fighting against. It might be something that you just have in your daily life, and you're learning how to live with that. And that's a normal thing for a writer. There's many, many writers throughout history that have dealt with bipolar disorder. There are several ways that we can work right now to fix dopamine problems. One of them is something that my husband does. I don't know if anyone's familiar with cold laser, but they can do brain balancing by stimulating the different neurotransmitters in your brain. And so he works on dopamine. And I can tell a huge difference. And that's something that I recommend to all writers to try. Aerobic exercise is something they recommend 2 to 3 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes. That's not too hard. Just do it in the morning and then write. Or in the evening, if you don't sleep well, do your exercise and then do your gratitude and then try to sleep, because you're getting out, you've mentally fatigued yourself with your writing and all the things that you experienced throughout the day, and then you need to let out the physical strain of sitting. That is hard on our bodies. We're never meant to sit forever. We were meant to be up and active. Also, yoga, highly recommended. Help yourself stay flexible because we are in such stationary positions all the time. Yoga is highly recommended. The nice thing about the internet now is you can do everything over the internet. You don't need to go to a gym to learn yoga. You can just do it all by watching online. Get enough sleep, and then diet. There are several things you can eat, and there are things that I snack on as a writer. When I get up and walk around, I'll grab a snack. They recommend snacking on dopamine-filled foods like pumpkin seeds and lima beans, which I don't snack on because they're lima beans, but that's an option. Bananas are really good for you. I love dried banana chips that haven't been sugared because they're sweet enough as it is, but it's a good thing to munch on. Keeping your brain active by eating something. Bananas are great. Almonds are highly recommended as a writer snack. Sesame seeds, and then the dark colored fruits and vegetables, high in dopamine, can help you replenish that. If you're struggling as a writer, grab a snack that's good for you instead of the high density sugar snacks that we crave, because our dopamine's low. It's a vicious cycle. So yeah, those are all highly recommended. And so we left some time for questions about having a healthy writer lifestyle. What questions do you have?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the fact that you are having the mental issues related to actually being a writer, or is it that you have those issues so therefore you choose to be a writer?
That is a good question. And in what I've been researching with writers and mental issues, our tendency and our want to be creative, it goes along with artists, with screenwriters, all these creative groups of people. It's already there that we want to be genetic. Yeah, that we want to be creative, but there's also that fine line because of our creativity that we walk the line of mental disorder. So yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and it's hard to say, hey, genetically you can have mental disorders, but it's true, and we need to be able to accept that too.
And most of them are hereditary, just so you know that. It's already in your blood, and so don't think that choosing to be a writer is the reason why these things come out. It's just that it's kind of already there, and actually writing is a therapeutic tool that you use to be able to deal with.
Yeah, so there's no guilt with it. I mean, you can't help if you have bipolar disorder, if you're schizophrenic. What you can do is just help yourself deal with it and handle it and be able to still be social and still be a writer and still be creative. Because if you lock away that creativity, that makes it worse. I don't know if anybody else has felt that. You can feel a little crazy when you don't get that chance to write, and that's part of it. That is true and real, and it's not in your head, even though it is in your head. But yeah, it's real. So you need to have that vent. You need to be able to let that go and be creative in whatever way you can. Question?
Can you show us some exercises for carpal tunnel?
Yeah, my husband, when he adjusts the wrist, but he also says, the neck stretches you need to do, touching your shoulder to your don't touch your shoulder to, that's not going to help anything. Touching your ear to your shoulder is very important. Yeah, you're like, this is easy. But also pull your hands down, pull them back. And I do that a lot. While I'm writing, I'll take a little writer break. And I have a lot of friends that pop their knuckles. And they've asked him, they said, is this bad? Am I actually causing arthritis? And he said, no, all you're doing, and the sound is just a release of gas from that joint, from the joint space, which is why you can only do it once. And then it has to build back up again. You're not doing anything that's going to hurt you unless it's causing pain. So don't do it.
So what my chiropractors told me is that when you're writing, you're sitting over the top of your keyboard and you're hunched over. And it causes your head to go forward, which causes these muscles right here to stretch and strain, which is why your nerves get pinched in your hands.
Yeah. So if you wake up and your hands
are back like this and keep stretching your head back, you don't make it go forward quite so much.
Yeah. I had a chiropractor that recommended that I lay on the bed with my head hanging off, and you just hold your head up. And it's kind of that practice. Yeah. Because of that, because we're stressing our muscles so much, that also leads to headaches. If your C1, C2 is out, if your atlas is slipped forward because of writing, which is often what my husband is treating, it's all from the same thing. And also, if you tend to have these fingers, your thumb and your last two fingers go numb, that's from a pinched nerve, and so you need to have that looked at too. So most of these problems might not be just due to the joints that we think they are. All of it has to run through here. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I didn't really have a question. I just kind of had a comment.
Okay.
Because I have bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And I just think that the experiences that you have when you have a mental illness, it's just like an extra struggle to kind of get back up to that normal functioning feeling, but I feel like that adds such a richness to your writing too, and it helps you kind of get into like the heads of your characters more. It helps you have more empathy and stuff. So it's like, yeah, it is kind of a package deal if you have a mental illness or you're on that creativity and you're in that kind of range or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like a superpower, if you use it right and you're getting the right medical treatment so you're not totally crazy.
Yeah, so you have your level, and that makes sense. And for my dad, he always described it when he was having one of his bipolar episodes. He would say, it was like I was watching myself do it and I couldn't stop it. And, for him, and one of the things we talked about in the other panel, the hazards to writer's health, is make sure if you have something like this, get diagnosed properly. Because for him, they told him he had OCD, which makes no sense whatsoever. But because of the misdiagnosis, they also misprescribed to him. And so he was taking all of these pills. And I don't know what you know about OCD and bipolar. It's the opposite of what you want to have. And so it nearly sent him off the deep end. And his brother actually committed suicide from the exact same thing. He'd been misdiagnosed, mismedicated. And my uncle was a wonderful person. And it was heartbreaking. It was about 7 years ago. And it was really hard on the whole family because nobody knew he was having this struggle. And it was just mind-blowing, and also opened all of our eyes that people in our family might need more help than we realize. They might be struggling more than they're letting on. And so to ask more questions and to be more open to just listen. Because sometimes an ear is all that we need.
And we had a panel earlier today talking about channeling adversity into great work. And the problem that we're running into with mental illness is that there is such a stigmata that goes along with it, right? Nobody wants to talk about it because then they're going to be labeled as crazy. We gotta quit that. We gotta stop. We've got to be able to say, hey, I'm thinking this way, I need help.
Yeah.
And not have that person go, oh my gosh, we need to get you to the doctor and we need to do all of these things that you would do with a crazy person, because that's not true. And we were talking with the psychologist that was there, and he's like, I could take every single person in this room and I could diagnose you with something, including myself. And so everybody has a tendency to have a little bit of that happening. But if we're open with the dialogue, then we don't have such an issue. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the thing about a group like this, being able to come to LTUE or any of the other writers' conferences and to be a part of a group. Give yourself a team around you so that you can be successful. And fill it with people. I mean, writers understand writers really well. And it's kind of hard, for my husband, who's a doctor and a chiropractor, to sometimes understand that as a writer, it can be difficult and you're in your head all day and you might not want to always be social, and he's in a very social job. And so, but there are other times where I will be writing all day and then I just need to talk to somebody. I've been so isolated, and then he'll get home and he's a chiropractor, which many of you may also know becomes a psychologist to all of your patients that, they're the ones that you talk to. And so he'll come home and he'll just have this overload of all the people that have talked to him, and he just needs quiet. And so we have this, in between where our twin boys really fell in really well with all their excitement and activity. And so, yeah, you've got to have that outlet. You've also got to build yourself your team. Make sure you have people around you that are there for you, even if it is, people on boards and on Facebook, and writers understand each other and we all want to help each other. And if you do have those negative people and the trolls and things that are always trying to tear you down and push your problems to the side, get rid of those people. We have plenty of time for positivity and no time for negativity, because, writing is amazing, and if we can be positive, we can do more. But if we're surrounded by negative people, then it's going to inhibit your creativity for sure. So surround yourself with positive people, and surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do and what you are doing, because they will inspire you and they'll say, hey, you can do it too. When I first thought I wanted to write, I was a 12-year-old girl living in Delta, Utah. We had a 3,000-acre alfalfa farm, and I spent every summer cutting alfalfa. And that is a long, boring job, but I loved it. I loved it because I was a daydreamer, and when you're driving 3 miles an hour and you just have to go straight, it is a great time to be creative. So that's where I started writing. I'd come up with stories and I'd continue them in my head. And I love to read. I remember I would take like 3 books and a bag of carrots and climb up a tree, and that's where I would spend my whole day. And my mom always knew where to look for me, and she never worried. And it was the best life, because I would go to the bookmobile in the summers, because we lived clear out in the middle of nowhere. I'd take the whole fantasy section home with me and give him the whole section I read the week before, and he'd refill it for me. And it was great. And when I decided to be a writer, I wrote to all of my favorite authors, and there were like 20 of them. And I wrote them all letters. I wrote them all letters, and one author wrote me back. And it was the best thing ever. It was Robin Hobb from Washington. I don't know if anyone's read the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy and the Live Ship Traders. She's amazing, and she's very magical, and she wrote me back, and I had just asked her for advice, and I really didn't think anyone would write me back. And she wrote me back, and she was so kind and sweet and eloquent and very positive about it. And she said, the best advice I can give you as a writer is you will never have more time to write than you do right now. She said, write in all the little moments. She said, you might think you have more time when you're in high school, or when you're in college, or when the kids are grown up, or when you're retired. You never do. You just fill your life with other things. And so write right now. And that's what I did. Every 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and I still do that. I've raised twin boys and a 14-year-old daughter, and that doesn't always leave a lot of time to write. But if I get 2 minutes in a day, I write. If I get an hour, it's like luxury, and you write forever. And then I realize when I have a full day, I don't write very well without all the interruptions, because I'm really used to the interruptions now. And I make use of that time, which is part of the mental side of being a writer, is to make use of the interruptions to make yourself a better writer. Part of my writing process is to create a playlist before I write a book. I'll create a music playlist of like 10 to 12 songs. Each song captures a different emotion. and I'll use that playlist and I'll listen to it 100,000 times while I'm writing that book. By the time I'm done, my 7-year-olds are singing all the songs. And everyone's sick of it except me, because I still love them. And they're all on my website. Every book has this playlist. And so if you read the book, you can listen to the playlist. But what that does is it keeps me mentally focused, and it keeps me from getting frustrated at the interruptions. Interruptions are inevitable. And so you'll be driving the kids to school. You'll be, making dinner or doing dishes, and I'll play the playlist in the background. And so that helps me stay on that writer's track. And when I'm in a scene, if I get stuck, I don't really get writer's block. And I'm teaching a class on that on Saturday about how to never get writer's block. And this is one of the keys that we'll talk about, is if I do get stuck, then I'll find the song that matches the emotion of the scene that I'm writing, and I'll listen to it over and over and over, and the scene builds itself. And it's a way to get past that and to keep yourself in the writer's flow, so that when you do have the chance to sit back down, you know exactly what you're gonna write. So it's a great way to stay mentally into the writer's process. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So one of the things that I struggle with is I have anxiety.
Yes.
And how do you take critiques that logically are not saying you're a horrible writer? Mm-hmm. They're saying, maybe try this, maybe try that. But internally, you're saying, you're a horrible writer.
You don't like it. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because...
Or a failure, or it all kind of...
Yeah.
It can be a little thing, and it's like this huge, I'll never succeed, I'll never do this. Mm-hmm. And it's hard because writing is personal, and it has to be personal. If you don't put yourself into your writing, they're not going to feel what you write. And so when we are putting it out there, people will say it's like putting your baby out there, and it is, because it's a piece of your soul. And you're saying, be nice to it. And people are not always nice because they're seeing a book. They're not seeing all the little parts of yourself that are in there. But that makes it hard. I know the hardest button as a writer to push, if you're a self-published writer, I'm a hybrid author, and so I have a traditional publisher, but I also self-publish. And I prefer the self-publishing. My traditional publisher will be like, I want these books in your series. And I'm like, no, I'm having a lot of fun with those. I'm keeping them for myself. But the hardest button is to hit that publish button. Because once you put it out there, you're at the mercy of the people on the other end of the screen. Yeah, and it's hard. And I'll admit, I remember my first bad review, or negative review, or whatever you want to call it, the 1-star review. I think he said that he would have put like -2 if he could have. And it kind of hurt a little bit. My husband was like, we need to track him down. We need to write him a letter. And I'm like, no. They say you can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. One of my writer friends at the last panel we were at, he said that he put that person into one of his books and he killed them brutally. So there's cathartism, and you can do it that way.
So
and
just
for me,
kill him in your next
There we go.
hard, yeah. And they tell you as a writer, be thick-skinned, and that's part of it, but they don't tell you how.
Yeah.
And they never teach you, how to not let them in. And you can say, all criticism is something you can learn from, and it's true. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean it hurts, because as writers and being so creative, we're also very sensitive people, and we have to be. Because our whole goal as a writer is to incite and elicit emotion into the readers. That's all you need to do. Like, that is the whole goal. If you can help people feel happy with your main character, feel afraid with them, cry with them, and feel the emotions they're feeling, then you've done your job. Because readers read to feel emotion. We go to scary movies to feel emotion. We go see La La Land to feel emotion. That's the whole
so
goal.
bad at that movie.
I love that movie. See, and you felt emotion and it impacted you, right?
Exactly.
The Lego movie. I laughed for like an hour after that movie. And it's because it's great and it elicited emotion. And so as writers, if we can feel and put that out there, that's good. And it's hard because I don't know if there is an easy way to say, just be thick-skinned. Because as much as we say that and we throw that around, I don't think any of us really are. You can get used to negativity. I've written 40 books. And by now I've had plenty of negative reviews. And I have some ranging from one the other day that gave my space opera 1-star because it wasn't military science fiction. I'm like, well, that wasn't what I wrote, so I'm okay with that. But it's still 1-star, and I'm like, all right, that'll still impact my stars, but that's okay. And then I had one that impacted me because he said something about there wasn't a love scene between the two characters, and I'm like, well, they weren't supposed to be in love. So that's just, their opinion versus my opinion. There are some critiques that I feel like we can learn from. My very first harsh criticism was from an agent, and it was 10 years ago. I sent my book Thief Prince to an agent, and I was really hopeful, and he wrote me back and he said, it's not my favorite. He said, it's okay, but I can tell you're not good at writing yet. You still have a lot to learn. And that's like, ugh. And I should have been happy because an agent wrote me back. They never do that. But he also said, which helped me, he said, you have good dialogue, but you don't have action between the dialogue. I don't know where your characters are. I don't know what they're doing. And so I've spent years building that up and working on it, and it was really good criticism for me, but it was hard to have that as a rejection and to have an agent say, you're not good at writing yet. But I've learned. I mean, I have over 1,000 rejection letters, and that's not even exaggerating. I've sent letters and letters and letters. I have a whole box full. I'm kind of triumphant about it. Like, here's my rejection box, and
because you're doing the work. That means you're doing the work. You've got
work.
all of those rejections.
Don't give up.
They are badges of honor.
That's right. I have a lot of badges of honor. And I didn't give up. About 10 years ago, I couldn't get my books into any agents, and I couldn't get anything to stick. You just send it out there, and you're just praying for that to land on that one person's desk who's in just the right mood at just the right time, and it's spaghetti against the wall, and nothing is sticking. And so I came to a writer's conference, and 6 years ago, I met a girl, and she was super positive and happy, and she says, I'm self-publishing my book tomorrow. And I was like, well, isn't that going to cost a lot of money? And I started talking to her about the particulars and getting into it, and I found out I could do the work. I'm not afraid of work. I could do the formatting. I can find covers and find a cover designer and find a good editor, and it's not going to cost very much. It shouldn't if you're doing it right. And I can get my books out there. That was 6 years ago, and now I have 40 books out there and thousands of reviews, and I think we added up the number of words I have published, and I've written 2.5 Bibles. And so that's a lot of words, and so that also equals a lot of rejection or a lot of positivity and a lot of learning. When people ask me where they should start reading my books, I'm like, well, probably the first series, but it's not my best one. You always start out like that because we're learning, because they say writing, I am so grateful that back then when I was first throwing my spaghetti against the wall, I'm glad those books didn't stick. Because if they were published right now, I'd be horrified to know that those were out there in print somewhere. So it's good, and it's hard, and it's a lot of work. And as writers, I think that's part of the mental side of it, is still telling ourselves we are good enough, and there is somebody out there that wants to read what we want to write. And there are affirmations in places that you might not even know you're going to find. For me, because Robin Hobb wrote me back, I made a vow that anyone who wrote me, I would write them back. And I get letters from everywhere. And there was this one school I went and taught at, and I taught 75 students, and I didn't realize this, but the teacher required all 75 students to write me. So that took a while to catch up, but I kept to my vow. Well, there's this one little girl, Olivia, from Nebraska, and we had written back and forth, and she was writing me about my books and some of the characters she liked, and then we wrote about horses, because I had some horses, and she had a horse named Cowboy, and so it'd been like 2 years we'd write back and forth, and she was so cute. I think she was 12 when she started. Well, about 6 months ago, she wrote me a letter, and she said, I don't know if you know this about myself. I don't think I've ever told you, but I have OCD. And she said, it's really bad. And she goes, sometimes I can't go to school. I can't be with my friends. I can't do anything because the OCD just takes over and it controls my life. And she says, you know what I do? I turn off the lights, I get my flashlight, and I start reading your books. I have all of your books next to my bed, and I start the first book. And by the time I get through 5 or 6 of them, the OCD's gone, and I can go live a normal life again. And to me, that one person makes all of this worth it. All the rejection, all of the learning. So you never know who you're going to impact. So keep working on it. It is worth it. Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, I think we're good. Okay.